I am absolutely, I'm thrilled to be here, actually. It's really nice to be here in downtown Toronto on a sunny day, and it's a delight to be able to talk to you about us. I'm here as a stand-in, admittedly. I'm here on behalf of Minister Joe Oliver. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui au CivicAction Summit et honorée qu'on m'ait demandé de remplacer le ministre des Finances, Joe Oliver. I did take a look at your agenda before I came in, and I know that you're expecting the balanced budget and low tax talk, which you will get, trust me, that's okay, just hold on for it. But I did want to note, just for a moment, some of the significant actions that we have taken in Ottawa in my term in government, actually, with respect to your 5 issues. And if I understand them correctly, and I want to thank the previous speakers for expanding on them, housing affordability for seniors. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done for seniors in my speech. Mental health support in the workplace. I really have worked very diligently in this field during my time as the Minister of Labour, and I'm quite proud of the fact that not only did we form the Mental Health Commission of Canada, we just announced an Economic Action Plan 2015 that we're renewing it for a further 10 years. And my intersection with them is that I was able to help work on the psychological standard for mental health in the workplace. And we take it one step further. You know, the federal government has 245,000 employees, the biggest employer in Canada, one would argue. So I was very pleased to notice and note that the Treasury Board and largest union, PSAC, struck an unprecedented deal to examine what's making public servants sick and driving mental health claims to record levels. And what it is, it's a memorandum of understanding to examine all policies, practices, and working conditions, and using the Mental Health Commission's National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace as the way to get forward in this issue. That's a huge, huge step forward in workplace mental health. And it's being done in the private sector as well, too, but I think it's important to note that we are working on it with respect to Ottawa, and we are leading in the area as well, too. I know you're talking about childhood health, as many of you know. It was our government and it was the Prime Minister who launched the G8 Muskoka Initiative for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health. Now that's worldwide, that's for help in developing countries. But what it does do, it signals the fact that Canada is serious about this issue. We are developing a capacity and an understanding, and that we're going to help share that around the world. And I think that's an important start too, to talk about it here in our own backyards. And then finally, of course, I'll be talking about infrastructure today later, but on public space, I was happy, and I'll give a little commercial here, 1 second, for Parks Canada, who is in your marketplace next door, who has lovely cards on the Rouge National Park, something of which we're very proud of, a people's park, a place to gather, enjoy, discover, and learn, and quite frankly, it is Canada's first urban park, national urban park, and I'm very proud of that too. So now back to the reason why you asked me to come here today, which is to outline what we've been doing in Ottawa and how our federal budget is actually going to be helping, I think, in terms of the 5 things or the issues that you put forward today. Minister Oliver is traveling the country right now, and he is talking about our budget, and that's primarily why I get to be here today in Toronto. But it's a balanced budget, and it directly and positively deals with the needs of hardworking Canadians and their families both today and tomorrow. But back in Ottawa, the debate has started on the budget, and you're probably not surprised to note that the opposition will not be supporting the budget and would reverse its measures, depending upon which party, depending upon which measures. But what we know fundamentally is, having this budget out there and talking to taxpayers, the people who will be paying for any of the reversals of the measures, of course, will be the taxpayer. And we've always focused with respect to the taxpayer and families when it comes to creating budgets and when it comes to implementing them. The government knew what it needed to do, and quite frankly, we went out and we did it. And we did it despite the global recession that financially harmed so many countries around the world that we are still hearing about today. Despite revenues from slipping oil prices, despite the costs of defending against the threat of jihadist terrorism, and in spite of the notion that you can spend your way into prosperity. So I sit in Parliament and I do listen to the opposition parties very intently. And my impression and what I'm coming away with is that I think they're out of touch when they're trying to reconcile what they would like to do in terms of spending and spend and deficit and debt, and what the country's net income really is. Now, fundamentally, I am a minister of the Crown. That's why I'm here today. But my most important job is I am a mother of 2 sons, as I mentioned before, 13 and 10. I'm also the member of Parliament for Halton, and that's important as well, too. But I do the budget at home. And maybe it's because I was trained that way by my grandmother in Cape Breton. But I know that all of my day is consumed by thinking about my budget and thinking about how to manage what resources we have. And I know for a fact that families in my riding do exactly the same thing. So either I'm at a basketball tournament or I'm at a hockey tournament or something like that, and I do talk to families about these issues, and they want to see a balance in Ottawa just like they want to see a balance in their household. And if there is money left over, they would like to have it back. Thank you very much. That is the truth. That is the reality that I live in, and it doesn't jive with what I'm hearing with respect to the notion that some of the benefits that we've put in place are only for the rich. And it really upsets me, quite frankly, that if elected, some of these parties would take those benefits back from the families that I talk about. Because I ask myself, quite frankly, how can this be only benefiting the rich when, quite frankly, 100% of all families in Canada, if you have a child under the age of 18, including single moms, including divorced moms, they will see this money coming their way. There's no question about it. It is not a select few. It is absolutely everyone, and that's because we balance the budget. Fundamentally, since 2006, and when I came along in 2008, we've always thought about government in the prism of families. We know what matters to them. If I could move to transfer payments for a second, I'll tell you why I'm moving to transfer payments. In Ontario, it's important to note that we receive almost $20.4 billion in federal transfers a year. That's actually an increase of $9.6 billion, 88% actually over what a previous government had done. But why are transfer payments important? Well, they're important because they're important to families. We know that these transfer payments pay for the things that Ontarians care the most about: hospitals and healthcare, education of children in the schools they attend, and care and protection of those who are less fortunate and more vulnerable. These are the priorities of our government. And despite what you may hear in other quarters with respect to criticism, our investment in these priorities have gone up. So when it comes to the GTHA and when it comes to Toronto, I was very pleased on budget night to see Mayor Tory giving our government some praise, although he did send me a letter on rail safety as well too, which kind of muted it on me, but that's okay. It was very good to see him on budget night giving us praise for our continued investment in infrastructure, and I appreciate it being noted at the beginning of this conference as well too, because this is a really important topic with respect to public transit. I live in Milton, and I know that the GO train is an incredible lifeline for those Miltonians who commute to downtown Toronto every day. I know my neighbors depend upon infrastructure, for sure. And our government's going to continue to provide an average of $5.35 billion a year for infrastructure projects across the country. But what we did on budget night was we launched the Public Transit Fund, which is $750 million over the next 2 years. Then there's an ongoing $1 billion every year thereafter as the fund's backbone. And that's really dedicated to public transit to make sure that it's there in a manner that's affordable for taxpayers and efficient for commuters as well, too. We're hoping it's going to fuel public-private partnerships. And the key measurable outcome is that we significantly reduce gridlock here in the GTHA, because we know that we lose billions in productivity here as a result of gridlock and insufficient public transit. Another visual aid today, another prop. We're not allowed to use props in question period, so I'm really outside of my purview here. But on the plane this morning, I noticed a great headline in the National Post, and it said, "Ottawa's new transit fund, a weapon of mass construction." Pretty clever. I thought that was very clever. But what they note is this: if implemented as proposed, this new transit fund could finance the biggest surge in Canadian infrastructure construction since the gas tax transfers began in the last decade. And we're very proud about the gas tax transfers, because not only did we make it permanent, we also indexed it as well, too, as an important part. Our government has focused on the economy, it's focused on families, and we're very much aware of the importance of the GTHA. I'm a GTHA minister, and I'm very proud of it. And it's important to remember that we have always delivered. Many of you will note that we're a year since we lost Minister Flaherty, James Michael Flaherty, who is a fantastic finance minister. But first and foremost, Jim was the member of parliament for Whitby, Oshawa. And I think the ministerial position he enjoyed the most was being the minister of the GTA. He truly loved his community. He truly loved this region. He really should be the one addressing you here today to talk about balanced budgets and talk about lower taxes, because I know how much he would enjoy it. But I also know, and he was a little bit more pugnacious and a little bit more into the fray than I am in terms of personality, but he also would be letting you know very clearly what he had accomplished for the GTHA in the past number of years. As Rod mentioned, there have been a number of elections that we've seen, provincial election and municipal election. Toronto in the news as campaigns on both fronts really did lead the 24/7 news cycle in the past couple of years. And of course, Ottawa is traditionally the black hat in all of this. We don't provide enough money to this project, or we don't fund enough on that project. And virtually any municipal or provincial election will see Ottawa be brought into it. So if Jim were here today, he would fire back a little bit more directly than I will. But channeling his spirit, I will tell you this. Our government has done much for this area, and we did it much before these elections. The money that was announced and put in play in Toronto and the GTHA happened well before the balanced budget of Minister Oliver last year. It was Jim, and it was the Prime Minister, and Jim would tell you that $4.5 billion in projects had been invested in the GTA between February 2006 and January of 2014, and more than half of this was in direct program spending. You know, since 2006, Canada has consistently led G7 countries in infrastructure funding as a rate of GDP, and that really is a sharp contrast from previous years. We made these infrastructure investments, which are $75 billion across Canada over the next 10 years, but we did it while we kept taxes low, the lowest tax level since John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister. Once we've signed off on our commitment to fund anything in terms of infrastructure, however, it really is up to the provincial government and the municipal councils to get transit and infrastructure projects rolling. That's not our job. That needs to be understood, and it needs to be repeated, and Jim said it many times. Now, being a GTA minister, I can tell you that our government very much is concerned about the devastation caused by being homeless, and that's another topic that you'll be discussing today. In February, Finance Minister Joe Oliver was in Toronto with Mayor Tory to announce an investment of $86 million specifically for the City of Toronto as part of a $600 million investment over 5 years to re-energize the homelessness partnering strategy across the country. Joe called it an investment in Toronto's most vulnerable, but he also called it an investment in Toronto's long-term prosperity, which is true, because it costs the Canadian economy $7 billion a year. But that's a dollar figure. The human factor is important as well, too, because the cost of human dignity that is lost in homelessness and the mental health issues that come with it have to be dealt with as well, too. We do believe that homelessness can be prevented, and we do believe that homelessness is not inevitable. So we made some unprecedented investments in affordable housing, 46,000 new affordable housing units, and have made contribution toward the construction or renovation of 104,000 housing units for low-income families under our Economic Action Plan. If you take a look at the GTHA alone, the number of individual housing projects runs 17 pages of small print. Anne Marie Hill Housing Co-op, Tommy Douglas Housing Co-op, the West Humber Community Co-op, almost A to Z in terms of the names of the co-ops that's supported. But ultimately, again, it's up to the provinces and municipalities to determine where and how best to use these funds, but the government in Ottawa is still there, and they're still funding these priority projects. And now to the part of the speech which separates my party and my government from the rest of the opposition parties. And that is the fact that as a government, we bucked the trend in the world and we actually lowered taxes on hardworking Canadian families. And now we are the government that gives them even more ways to get relief from taxation too. Measures introduced since 2006 provide tax relief and benefits, disposable income in people's accounts that amount to $6,600 for the typical Canadian two-earner family of four. We have increased the annual contribution limit to our tax-free saving account to effectively $10,000, which I hear in QP is not a good thing and benefits only the rich. I don't see it that way. I mean, the truth of the matter is the TSFA has become a very highly popular and an important vehicle for savings. There's 11 million Canadians out there utilizing the TFSA, and they are in the lower class, and they are in the middle class as well, too. And importantly, they are seniors. And we further supported seniors by reducing the minimum withdrawal limit for registered retirement income funds, and we've introduced a new tax credit, the Home Accessibility Tax Credit, to help those seniors and those who have disabilities to help with renovation costs so that they can live independently and that they can stay in their homes, which can really extend not only their lives, but their quality of life as well, too. And we have extended the employment insurance compassionate care benefits from 6 weeks to 6 months, caring for family members who are gravely ill and at risk of death. And I suspect that there's nobody in this room that has not been touched by this situation or who does not know somebody at this moment who is caring for or comforting a loved one during their last days. In general, since 2006, our economic action plans have been working. Since the depths of the recession, over 1.2 million net new jobs have been created. Overwhelmingly, the majority are full-time, well-paying, and in the private sector. And what a balanced budget for us means more tax cuts for Canadians and Canadian families and less debt for future generations. I've been part of this government since 2008, and I'm very proud to note that the overall federal tax burden is at its lowest level in more than half a century. But we are committed to greater tax relief, and we are committed to give greater assistance to the leaders of the future. We're committed to get the small business tax rate down to 9%, and keeping promises that have seen small business taxes actually reduced by the Harper government by 50% since we were first elected. And that's an important one because it does show and signify that we view small businesses as a true economic engine. On the entrepreneur side, we had two pieces in the budget that I like to highlight. One has to do with youth entrepreneurs, $14 million set aside for future entrepreneurs. And the second one is our specific action plan for women entrepreneurs. And one of the key elements of that is $700 million being available in loans from BDC for women-led companies. I'm very proud of the action that our government's taking there. As well, although a small thing, big in my world, the Canadian Business Corporation Act is proposed to be amended to have the larger corporations who are federally regulated in Canada to have the explain or comply policy with respect to their assessments of human resources and their board membership. So that means the telcos, the banks, and all the traditionally male transportation companies will now have that policy that they should be putting in place at their board level. This isn't just visionary, this is necessary. So to wrap it up, I will conclude by talking about Minister Oliver. I spent a lot of time talking about Jim Flaherty because even today I can still feel his presence in the room and I can see what he has accomplished in the GTHA. But what Minister Oliver said in his budget speech last week really does reflect and capture why a balanced budget is the only way that we can assure long-term prosperity for Canadians. When we first took power in 2006, Prime Minister Harper and Jim Flaherty had to work very hard to help reduce Canada's substantial federal debt. And we did it by finding the ways and the means to do so. 2008, the year that I was elected, the world was rocked by the greatest financial meltdown since the Great Depression. This wasn't our fault. We did not create this crisis, but it was one that nobody could escape. So as Minister Oliver put it, we took extraordinary measures to protect the financial security of Canada. But let there be no mistake. We did it with a clear and a prudent plan to reduce the balance, because as I said before, and despite what others may be telling Canadians, you can't spend and borrow your way to prosperity. And that is why, as Mr. Oliver said, the budget of our government, which was delivered last Tuesday, was written in black ink. We promised it to Canadians, and we delivered it to Canadians. I want to thank very much the CivicAction for inviting me to speak at the summit on behalf of Minister Oliver. I wish you all the greatest of success in your deliberations and your continued discussion on the topics that are of such an importance. The future of our region really does depend upon the great thinkers in the room, and I'm honored to be in your presence this morning and give my contribution as I see it from Ottawa. The challenge is certainly there, and so is the adventure, though, of meeting the challenge head on. I wish you all very well. Bon succès à tous. Merci. Thank you very much.